petals of magnet back to our arms, bring them home.
Welcome to Peace Now. My name is Trudy Quaife. I'm a member of Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace. We're a local organization of friends and neighbors, and we've been advocating for peace and justice for 14 years. I'm your host today, and I'm joined by Fazana Saleem Ismail. Welcome.
Thank you so much for your invitation. I appreciate it.
Glad you're here. Could we start out, let me just tell you a little bit about Fazana. She's a mother, she's a research scientist, she's a practicing Muslim, and she's a member of a very important organization in the Capital Region, which is the Capital District Coalition Against Islamophobia. That was a lot for me to get out. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Could you talk a little bit about your background? Where were you born? Where did you grow up? And what was it like?
Sure. Well, I was born here in the U.S., in Staten Island, to Muslim Sri Lankan immigrant parents. My parents came here in 1971. I was born in 1972. I predominantly went to Catholic schools throughout my schooling years, save for a couple of years spent in Sri Lanka, where I went to local schools over there. But I'm, for the most part, a Catholic school girl product. And I used to love writing on my college essays that I was a Muslim girl who went to Catholic school and worked at the Jewish Community Center, because that's who I was. And I've been surrounded by people from different backgrounds my entire life. So, and I feel like my life is richer for it. And I've learned lots from different people. So I'm somebody who's a great champion of learning about other people and engaging in conversation and dialogue. So I've been doing that. I kind of do that throughout my life. My educational background, I got my bachelor's in economics and did my master's in public policy. Mm-hmm. So I'm a researcher, as you mentioned, by profession, social scientist. I'm a social scientist, not a actual scientist in terms of the sciences, but do evaluation research and just love meeting people from all over the world.
Okay. Could you tell us a little bit why you got involved with the Capital District Coalition Against Islamophobia?
Sure. There are a couple of layers to why I got involved in that particular organization. In December 2015, when the negative rhetoric towards Muslims was reaching a really strong, what I refer to as a fever pitch, I realized I had to do something, and because I was just really concerned about the impact it would have on everyday Muslims, particularly children. I personally had an experience. I haven't really been discriminated much, at all throughout my life. However, when my daughter was 7, she was in elementary school. She was in 2nd grade, and in December she was asked to do a project on traditions. Now, in that particular December, Muslims weren't really celebrating Ramadan or anything because we go according to the lunar calendar. So I recommended to her that she write something about Ramadan. So she wrote a book, which is featured right here, in her very painstaking, perfect little handwriting as a 7-year-old. It's 10 pages, included pictures, has, pronunciations, and she presented it to her class. The day she came home after presenting it, I asked her how to go, and she was like, oh, well, nobody clapped for me. And, she's a sensitive child, so I thought, maybe we're at the end of the day, the kids are tired, they want to go home, it's Friday after all. So we kind of left it at that. 3 years later, she told me, she asked me, do you remember that book I wrote for school? And I said, yeah, why? She said, well, I didn't tell you something about that day. And I said, well, what didn't you tell me? And she told me, well, after I finished reading my books and we were packing up to leave, one of the boys came up to me and asked me weird questions. And I took a step back and I'm like, well, what do you mean? And so when she told me what she told me, my heart sank, because he had asked her, are your parents bad? Mm-hmm. Do they do bad things? And my heart just fell, because I realized, first off, when she was 7, she didn't understand why he was asking her that. and she didn't know how to respond to it. And 3 years later, as a 10-year-old, I think she had been a little more exposed, and she understood more, but she held on to that. And I realized for her sake and the sake of other Muslim children, I needed to do something. So I decided to offer myself up as a resource on Islam. I'm not a scholar. I'm just somebody, as you said, who practices Islam, to talk about Islam with people and let people know that we're normal people. We just practice a different religion. And through that effort, I got involved with the Capital District Coalition Against Islamophobia, an amazingly wonderful group of people who are championing the cause of anti-Islamophobia. And I've been really blessed to work with them. I do a lot of the community service activities for them. They do wonderful things like, getting resolutions passed against Islamophobia and organizing rallies and a great number of things.
One of the activities that you do is you staff a table, an Ask a Muslim table at various places around the capital region. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. One of my friends and colleagues from the coalition, Lynn Jackson, I refer to as my honorary Muslim because she's always at these tables. She's actually the person who knows a lot. She's been in the activist community for a long time, so she knows about what events are going on, and she's the one who, talked to me about, let's do this. And so we actually had a table at the Radix Ecological Center's Earth Day celebration at the Tulip Festival, at the I think the Labor Day picnic at Cook Park and Colony, and Delaware Avenue Street Fair. So we've been trying to do a number of these events, and the point is for us to have Muslims out there in public and have people come up to us and just basically have a conversation with us. So what we usually do is we have a range of different people, since some of these are day-long events. So we have had like up to 5 different people serving like a couple of hour shifts. And interestingly enough, our interactions have generally been very positive. Most people come up to us and we're like, we're really glad you're doing this. After all, this is Albany, and a lot of people, we're blessed to have a lot of people support us. But every so often, we've had an individual come up to us and quote a line from the Quran completely out of context, and kind of engage in a discussion about why it's there and what it means. And and you find that some of the people who come up to you, very rarely, but they're those people who no matter how much dialogue you try to engage, they will believe what they want to believe. So
right.
But we believe that reaching out to individuals, getting to know us as people will help individuals not only give them information, but also will have them want to stand up for us more, because they can look back at a human being and think of us as an individual, not just as a token Muslim.
What would be a typical question they might ask you?
Well, it's interesting. I've gotten the question a lot of, how do you find time to pray 5 times a day? Because that, as many people have heard that, and they're like, well, how do you do it? And well, I laugh, and when I talk to high school students, I show them we have an app that on our phones that tells us when, because our prayers are, because there's one prayer before dawn, one around noon, one in the afternoon, one after one before sunset and after sunset. So we have it's 3 to 5 minutes long, depending on, or 5 to 10 minutes long, depending on how long you want to spend in reflection. But the point is, to remember God throughout the day. So, just as most of us, who are working, we take lunch breaks. You use your lunch break, or if you have an evening meeting, you can excuse yourself for a few minutes, and you can pray just about anywhere. It's just a matter of taking time out to do it.
Okay. You also give talks to schools and churches.
Yes, I do. This past year has been really busy because I just recently got into it, but there's a hunger for information, and oftentimes you don't it's great to hear from somebody who knows what it's like to be Muslim. You can get so much information from books, which I believe in doing, but it adds a different layer when you meet somebody face to face. So I've gone to Girl Scout troops, middle schools, high schools, libraries. I even went to a group of insurance professionals because they were just really interested. And every one of these at meetings has resulted in having new friends who are new champions of Islam. And what, I often tell people, it's not enough for me to tell people, me as a Muslim, to try to tell people, well, that's not who Muslims are. Other people who know me and other people who are non-Muslim need to support us and say, listen, I know this Muslim woman. This is how she leads her life, and this is not what is portrayed often in the media.
I think that's really important. Let's talk a little bit about Islamophobia. I know, especially since Donald Trump has been elected, there's been a lot of fear. There's talk about the Muslim registries. How does the Muslim community feel about this? Are they scared? What are they talking about?
Well, a number of people are worried, and not only about the concepts like the registries, but just how they're going to be treated on a daily basis. I mean, there have already been reports, interestingly enough, during the election cycle itself. There's an organization called the Bridge Institute, or it's more like a think tank that's run out of Georgetown University. They did a kind of an analysis on Islamophobic events that took place in 2015, and they found that in December, the month in which there was a lot of negative rhetoric going on as a result of San Bernardino and the Paris attacks, that 1/3 of Islamophobic events took place in that month. Over the course of the year, like when you compared it. So all of those events, they account for 1/3 of the entire year's Islamophobic events. After the election, there have been about, in the 2 weeks after the election, there were 700 anti-hate incidents throughout the country, and about 250 of them were anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant. So, Muslims are fearful. When particularly women who wear hijab, because they're very noticeable, and people, we have noticed here, I've talked to people here in the capital region. In general, the capital region is a wonderful place for Muslims. I mean, compared to a lot of other areas in the country, we have a lot of support here. However, there have been instances where, it's a Muslim woman working in a drugstore was yelled at by a customer who did not want to have her serve him. We've had incidents where women walking out of malls have had the police called on them because they look suspicious. So there is the fear, and it's valid fear, because unfortunately with having a president-elect who has been so outspoken in his negative comments, it's just given license for the average person to kind of do that as well. And that's where the fear lies. And things like, a concept of registry. I think a lot of the immigrant community are worried that they're going to have to, leave the country at some point and maybe have that break up their family. I mean, it happened after 9/11 with the National Security Entry-Exit registration system, otherwise known as special registration. You had Muslim men over the age of 16 voluntarily go to register themselves at the request of the government, and of 80,000 men who registered themselves between 2002 and 2003, 13,000 of them were put in deportation hearings, proceedings, and many families were broken up. You have a lot of teenagers who had to grow up without a father because their father was shipped back to whatever country they came from, and and that policy was put into place, and it was targeted towards 24 countries, all of which were Muslim majority countries, save for North Korea. So a lot of activists were upset about that because it was discrimination on the basis of national origin. So for proposals like another registry to come up, it's just mind-boggling. Just the thought that, oh my gosh, are we going to have to go through this all over again?
It's, to me, it's just so upsetting. It just makes no sense at all to be targeting Muslims at this point. What about incidents in the capital region? Do you know of any specific incidents, or just you've generally heard things, and how does the capital region compare to other areas of the country?
Well, you hear about some incidents here and there, like the ones I mentioned. I don't know if necessarily I'm not sure how many people are reporting them, to be honest with you, but I've heard of hijabs being pulled off of women's heads. I think more recently it took place in Hudson Valley Community College. There have been incidents on the U Albany campus, not many, but in general, I think compared to the rest of the country, we have a wonderful community here. I mean, I mentioned the Capital District Coalition Against Islamophobia. You're involved with Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace. There's all these amazing organizations. We have a wonderful interfaith community here that's been very active for many, many years. I mean, the Interfaith Alliance of New York State, they've been very active in promoting, solidarity amongst members of all religions, or no religions for that matter. So, we have an amazing community of people who who believe in solidarity and standing up for justice. So, I think it's a special place to be because, even though there might be these incidents that I mentioned take place, I mean, I think a lot of other Muslims know that a lot of other people have our backs. So that's important.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Well, time is going by very rapidly. We probably have 12 or 13 minutes to go. There's a couple more things I'd like to talk about. While we're on Islamophobia, let's talk about the decal that your organization has come up with. What was the reason for developing the decal, and how do you see it being used?
Well, after Inauguration Day, I think everybody's kind of bracing themselves for our world changing quite a bit. It has been for the last year or so, and I think everybody who's a member of a marginalized committee is going to be on alert. So the idea behind the decal was to let people know, without having to say anything to them, that a place of a business or a home was a safe place for them to go. Like, they would not be discriminated against. They wouldn't have somebody yell at them or try to remove their hijab or yell racist epithets towards them. So we had we had a kind of contest and asked people to submit their artwork, and the winner was my colleague and friend Jean Finley's wonderful depiction of a door, an open door with a U.S. flag that says "Ahlan wa sahlan" in Arabic, which means welcome, bienvenido in Spanish, and then welcome in English, and saying we stand against racism and Islamophobia, we stand with refugees and immigrants. This decal is available off our website, which is www.stopislamophobia.com, and you could print it out as a JPEG file, as I did. I mean, this is a very large rendition. We are also printing up postcard size decals, which we will be distributing for free. So if somebody is interested in obtaining many decals for either their businesses, their homes, their neighborhood, they're welcome to go to our website and kind of just sign their name and information. And we want as many people, we want everybody in the capital region to be posting these on their businesses' doors or their house doors, so people know, this place is a safe place.
Very good. Let's move on to some of the other charity work that you're doing. You have a nonprofit organization that you have founded yourself, where you do birthday parties?
Yes, I do. It's not a nonprofit yet. I'm still working on getting formal nonprofit status, so I refer to it as a volunteer project. It's a very time-consuming volunteer project. It's called Jazzy Sun Birthdays, and we do personalized birthday parties for children living in homeless shelters. So we find out themes the children like, and we basically try to give them a birthday party experience that they might not otherwise have due to their circumstances. And we've been doing it for about 5.5 years now. We have volunteers from all over the capital region, as young as 5, as old as 80, who've participated either on-site at parties or baked cakes for us. And it's just an amazing experience because we want children to understand that no matter what their circumstances are, they're valued. And, we try to work with families if they want to work with us. Because we don't want to supplant parents in any way. This is us just wanting to show that, we're there for them as community members. One of the other things I love about the project is it brings people from different backgrounds together. So during Ramadan, we've had Muslim women come in and children come in while they were fasting and having a party and face painting and distributing pizza. So it shows community, and it gives people the opportunity to understand Muslims from a personal perspective, not just Muslims, anybody, and it brings people from different backgrounds together, and I'm very passionate about that.
So it could be a birthday party for anyone in the capital region, any child in the capital region?
We work with homeless shelters just because it's easier to coordinate that way. My dream, and I've been slowly kind of working towards this, is to also reach out to families whose children may, whose families who are low income but may be housed. So they're struggling to make ends meet, so they still may not be having parties for their kids. So what we're hoping to do is maybe partner with some food pantries and give them maybe birthday bags where they have cake mix and decorations and maybe a gift or two, so that the families can celebrate on their own. But the point is to make, I'd like to say, to make children feel like kings and queens for a day. That's really the goal.
It's a great idea, and I think it furthers your goal of people getting to know you as a person, as a Muslim. I think it's a wonderful idea.
Thank you.
And really needed in the community. Yeah. Well, let's go back to Islamophobia again. We've got a few more minutes. What can people do in the community to support Muslims?
Well, we talked about the decals, but I think in general, just reach out. I think, if you see in your school, if people go to school events and they see a new family or a family they don't recognize, approach them and talk to them, and just try to let them know I'm here to get to know you, and I encourage Muslims to do that as well, to not be taken aback by what might be perceived as strange questions. Just understand that it's people wanting to get to know you. So I encourage people to kind of show solidarity that way by reaching out and trying to become friends with the individuals. I also think that if you see somebody being targeted, or you see somebody, like let's say you're in that drugstore where somebody's yelling at the cashier because she's wearing a hijab, step in. Don't just be a bystander. You need to support each other, and that goes a long way. Or if you see a Muslim, just say salam. It just goes. It's really I've always been taught. When you go to other countries, try to learn their language. I mean, here, yes, you're in America and people are trying to learn English, but it goes a long way when you kind of reach out to somebody who may not speak English, particularly if they're an immigrant, that if you reach out to a Muslim and say salam, it just suggests to them that, it's salam means peace. So,
peace.
So it suggests to them that you're a friend. It can be.
Okay. What kind of projects do you think you'll be working on in the future? We've got 5 minutes left, so what kinds of activities do you think will help bring us all together?
Well, I think right now we're doing a lot of activities to kind of teach people about standing up for social justice, not only Islamophobia, racism, homophobia, sexism. So I think to give people tools to do it, because a lot of individuals aren't, born activists. I think they're thrust in that role. I think a lot of people after the election realize they need to be more involved. So that's why I foresee us doing a lot more work towards kind of building up that community. I think, we at the coalition are working a lot with other organizations like Citizens for New York, and the Sanctuary for New Immigrants, because we are stronger together, and we recognize that. So that's part of what we're doing. I personally am planning to continue to do my talks at different organizations and churches. I already have 2 lined up, and I'm sure I'll be having many more as we continue to go forward. And I think trying to get into schools more. We're also trying to do a survey to get a sense of what is Islamophobia here in the capital region. We hear things anecdotally, but for us to really get a pulse on what's going on, we need to know more concretely.
I think that's important. Now, you brought a few books today. Could you tell us about these books?
Sure.
Are these books that you read in the schools?
Yes, actually. Well, the first one is my daughter's book, and I do read that sometimes to the younger children, particularly, and explain to them my daughter wrote this book, and
it's about
Ramadan. It's called Ramadan, a very special month for Muslims. So she goes into detail about what Ramadan is and what it means to her and how we celebrate Ramadan. There's this book I just discovered recently. It's called My Name is Sangol. And it's a wonderful story about a Sudanese refugee, and who is escaping, a really horrible situation in Sudan, and comes to the U.S., feels very homesick, and has a really hard time because nobody knows how to pronounce his name. But it's a really heartwarming story about how he, gets involved, and the kids themselves come up with a way to remember how to pronounce his name. And that's appropriate for maybe like 1st, 2nd, 3rd graders. And this book over here, My Name is Bilal, is more appropriate for like 4th through 6th graders. It's again about a boy who is a Muslim boy whose sister wears hijab, and they move to a new area where his sister's hijab is pulled off her head, and he kind of goes underground and calls himself Billy. He doesn't want to be identified as Muslim, and we find that a lot happening. So it goes into why he should be proud to be Muslim and his kind of transformation. It's more appropriate for older kids, slightly older kids.
Okay.
They're great books to read.
All right. Well, thank you. We just have a minute or two left. I wondered if there is anything you'd like our viewers to know about Islam. What would you like people to know in a minute or so?
Well, Islam is a religion of peace. The root of word S-L-I-M is actually it means peace, and Muslims are supposed to live their lives in service of God, and to do the best you can do to get into heaven, and that means treating people well and doing things that would make God happy. And I think a lot of times that message is distorted, but the average Muslim just wants to do good and does charitable works and cares about their fellow human being, and that's how we want to be seen.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me here today, Fazana. Thank you so
very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you all for joining us, and please join us for future shows where we'll be talking about the price of war. Thank you.